Today, Wendy and I wanted to do a short video as she and I have been talking to other people about our group, Demystifying the Transgender Journey, and about the project, the podcast, and the book that we're putting together. We realize that people don't understand when they hear the word transition, they don't understand that that could mean a lot of different things, that there are different stages to transitioning. So we're doing this short video today to help educate people. And Wendy's going to talk to you about the different stages and what it means to transition. Thanks, Wendy.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. The word transition implies change, changing who we are. There are definite stages to doing this. Once somebody realizes that they do need to transition, and that's the operative word there is need to transition. There are people within the transgender community who cross-dress occasionally and things like that, but they don't necessarily want to live full-time as women or as men. They're just satisfied with kind of shifting from one world to the other occasionally to relieve those kinds of tensions that they experience and to have what they feel is a more pleasant experience. But when somebody knows they need the transition, one of the first steps is to begin what you would call socially transition. If it's a younger child, a minor still living at home, they may just go and adopt the appearance and the clothing of the opposite gender, and that's it. Minors very, very rarely, if ever. Most surgeons will not even consider doing surgeries on minors. Even with hormone therapy, they're less likely to consider that as well. It's just socially transitioning until they get older. That's a lot about what parents do with transgender children. It's just a social transition. Actually, nowadays, among younger people, it's not really a big deal for so many of the young people in today's world.
Well, some of them even just want to dress in an androgynous look too, even
Exactly.
if they're still trying to figure out what's going on. Don't they do
Right.
that?
Absolutely. It's not at all uncommon for younger people going, like minors going from female to male. They'll adopt a much more androgynous approach to it. It's kind of getting a sense for who they really feel they are. And at that age, that's really all they need to do.
Change their name too, though, right? They might want
Right.
to change their name or their pronouns rather than doing anything more extensive.
And that's the part that requires some education for parents and education for relatives and friends and neighbors, is just learning to accept that kind of change from a younger child, a younger person.
And treat them with respect.
Oh, absolutely. Then you get into your 20s. If you transition at that age, yes, that person will probably start out by dressing in the clothing of the opposite gender, presenting that way. And it could be a very gradual process, or they could just really readily adapt to it and move forward. It depends on that person and how they feel about themselves and how they accept themselves, because self-acceptance is a huge part of this. Most of us have lived with a lot of shame, fear, guilt, all of those types of feelings for having felt this way about our lives. In order to quote unquote transition, we have to begin to accept who we really are and embrace that and start to move forward with it. Part of that early stages of transition, in addition to living full time, could be just living part time, experimenting with it, going out, having different life experiences. At some point, that's where we would also start hormone replacement therapy. For male to female, it's estrogen with testosterone blockers. And for female to male, it's definitely hormone blockers and testosterone. There is an emotional impact to that. I know from talking with people on both sides, it's quite a profound difference in how you feel about yourself. For me, it was the sky opened up. I felt like I was totally myself. I became much more social, much more outgoing. Everything just sort of just started to fall into place. It started to feel good, and I just wanted to keep going. Once you get to a point where you are living full time, that's when you start with the legal name changes. In some states, it's easy to do your birth certificate. Mine happens to be in a state which is not so easy to do. So I went to court and I got a court document that, said my legal name changes is now Wendy. That's who I am. If I am in a situation where I have to present a birth certificate, I also present a court document, and that's the end of it. Hormone replacement therapy really begins to work. It's a slow process, but over the first 2 years or so, it really does have an effect on your body. In my case, a shift of body fat, breast development, everything began to happen.
Well, and that's a time to be doing some therapeutic work.
Right.
Don't you recommend that?
Oh, absolutely. That is one of the first things with my clients. Are you seeing a therapist?
Mm-hmm.
We all have a lot of baggage to unpack. And no matter where you are in this process, just starting out or whatever, you need a therapist. And one who can relate to what you're going through is very critical. Most really good therapists will have a good deal of understanding of what it means to be born transgender. And that's what you need to do. I did a lot of research. I mailed out to quite a few therapy clinics, asked for anyone who was willing to work with me and understood this. I wound up choosing an outstanding therapist for me.
So that would come before the final part, which would be the surgical part. Is that right?
Absolutely. For most surgeons who are really competent at this and really good at doing the surgeries, the requirement is at least a year of therapy and a year of seeing a psychiatrist
And living full time that way.
and living full time.
Yes.
Full time is also the key. I had been living for, let's see, about a year and a half when I first went for my surgical consultation. I had already had 2 years of therapy, and I'd been seeing a psychiatrist for a little over a year.
So
And
people don't just jump into this, do they? I mean, there may be some who jump into it, but not the ones who have taken the time to figure out how to do this.
I do know there are people that go and try and shortcut the process, actually look for places where they can get letters for the surgeons and all of that, but that's not a good way to go. You do need to work yourself through this and to actually go through the process. It is a profound life change, to say the least.
Well, and some people don't choose to go the surgical route, do they? Some may live the rest of their lives in that persona, in their gender that they were born to, but still retain the genitals that they were born with. Is that right?
There is a difference between sex, gender identity, and socialization. With sex and gender identity, sex is just your biological organ. The thing that the doctor saw when you were born and said, oh, it's a boy or it's a girl. That's sex. That's the genitals and the anatomy that you were born with. Not everybody has surgery. There are no rules for this. Back in the last century, anyone who actually did this would have had to go and jump through a lot of hurdles, and it would have cost anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 cash up front to have surgery from somebody who did this. Nowadays, it's done in university hospitals with professional trained surgeons who are highly skilled at this, with techniques that probably didn't exist in the last century.
So if someone hasn't had surgery, does that mean they're not fully a woman or not fully a man if they still have different genitals?
Actually, no, it doesn't. That's just a part of the anatomy. When you see two transgender women together, they are a couple. What's between their legs is nobody's business. It's theirs and theirs alone.
And people try and figure that out. Those of us who were born same sex, same gender, cisgender, are sometimes have a hard time trying to understand what's between their legs. How do they do it? And it's nobody's business. It does
And
not matter, does it?
no, it doesn't. And the thing that is confusing to most people outside this world is they equate the word sex with gender identity. And they're two different things.
Yeah.
Gender identity is between the ears, not the legs. That's the simplest way to look at it. It's also being gay, that's sexual orientation. That's also between the ears, not the legs.
And it has nothing to do with whether they were born transgender or not. They could be hetero, gay, lesbian, whatever. And the doctor doesn't know that at the time. And that's something that they were born with and they just developed that way.
Exactly. This is the thing that I even found one of acquaintances who was a psychologist. It took a couple of conversations in a week or two for him to wrap his head around the idea that in LGBT world, the L, the G, and the B is sexual orientation. Who you love, who you're attracted to, has nothing to do with the genitals. It's how you're wired. It's how you are as a person, how you were born. The T is gender identity. Most people never think of the word gender. They always use the word sex. Male and female, that's your sex. That is how the doctor identified you when you were born. That's as far as it goes. Your gender is between your ears.
Well, and the doctor didn't really know what was between this baby's ears.
Exactly.
So
Now, when you get into LGBT, a T can be an L, a G, a B, or heterosexual,
or none of the above.
or none of the above. There is that as well, asexual.
There's some who are, yeah, asexual.
Right.
Yeah.
When it comes to sexual orientation, I was married for 40 years to a woman. That was one of the check boxes I had to fulfill in my early 20s to be perceived as normal, regular part of society. I got married. I was told that it would fix me. I would forget all about being a girl.
That didn't work, did it?
Oh, you see how wonderfully that worked. I, I struggled with that and struggled with that. I was so terrified of getting married. That was one of my sources of guilt for 40 years. The turmoil and everything else was just intense. That's what people go through with this.
Mhm.
And that's why I say we transition to survive. I found out in late 2014 that doing what I needed to do was now possible. The medical community had changed in 2012 and it became something that was routinely done in hospitals now. I had to go have my birth defect corrected. That's how I looked at it. Once I changed my mindset and everything else, because I admit when I started, I was terrified. It's a very scary thing to face. My therapist was absolutely wonderful. We've done a whole podcast series that includes that experience.
Well, so thanks for all that explanation, Wendy. Let's just summarize it for our audience today. So people usually start out transitioning socially. If we're
Right.
talking about what is this transition, what does the word transition mean? So there's a social transition.
And
Then
they'll dress part-time and go out and experiment and have experiences and get comfortable with themselves.
okay, and then there's the hormone piece of it at some point.
Right.
Whether they're younger, maybe gender block or puberty blockers possibly coming in there with the medical advice. But there's that type of medical intervention at that point, and we're not tying an age to it, but just somewhere that there's the
Right.
medical intervention, and then maybe surgery. So
Exactly.
that's the whole spectrum. But there are people who are living without the surgery, without any surgery and living in their authentic gender. So that
Right.
word transition means a lot of different things, and people are really confused about that. Thank you for clarifying that, giving us some examples.
And one last point on the sexual orientation.
Yeah.
Some of us don't know what our true sexual orientation was. I, for one, had repressed everything about my life and who I was because I was trying to fit into all the heteronormative society rules of how you're supposed to be. Then after I started living as Wendy full-time on my own, I still had really no idea. I know what my sex was anatomically, but who I was really truly attracted to and how that all worked, I didn't really have an idea of that until after I had surgery. That's when everything kind of fell into place. The incongruence of my body and my mind was gone. And that is such a powerful experience.
So then you could be your authentic self because all of
Right.
it was aligned.
Exactly.
And then you started dating.
And that's when I discovered I'm a heterosexual woman. Before that, the idea of being with a man was gross. Truly was. I wasn't gay.
You weren't gay. Very interesting, Wendy. Thank you so much for this. And
And thank you for having this conversation with me.
I think it's an important conversation to share with as many people as we can, because like I said, there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Absolutely.
And thank you to our audience. Thank you for listening today, and look for us on Facebook. Ask to join our Demystifying the Transgender Journey, and look for our podcast, which when we're recording this, we don't have that out there yet, but it will be out there maybe by the time you listen to this.
If you ever want to reach out to me personally and just ask questions or talk, I'm an open book and ask anything you want. Nothing is off limits. meetwendycole.com is the easiest way to reach me.
Okay. Thank you so much, Wendy. Look for us and share this video out. We want to educate as many people as we can. So again, thank you for joining us today. I'm Lynn Murphy, founder of Women Who Push the Limits. And this has been Wendy Cole, who is a transition mentor and coach. Thank you for joining us today, and tune in for some of our other videos.